I remember that moment when I was on my knees and my forearms, and I was watching blood steadily run from my nose and make a pool on the mat in front of my face. And it was that moment, I think, that a fighter was born. That was a very big moment in my career, because that was the make or break moment. That was the fight or flight moment. That was, what am I here to do?
Hey guys, welcome back. You're listening to the Ancient Health Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is a fun episode and a new one for me because I have the privilege of interviewing and having our guest for today as a pioneer in really, we're talking big time pioneer, but she is a pioneer for females in the fighting arena for women's mixed martial arts as well as the UFC. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what her journey is. But on top of that, she's a mom and she's doing life while she's honoring her body, setting big, audacious goals, but she's doing it in a way that I believe is so holistic. And I think that that's really respectable. It's honorable. And Miesha Tate, I'm just so thrilled that you are spending some time with us here today. I know we're going to have a lot to glean. I'm actually personally very interested in your story, really understanding how you got to where you are today. So thank you for being here.
Yes, thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. And I think I've got a unique story, but hopefully it's relatable to people in all facets of life. You know, I'm just a passionate and ambitious person. And I think when those two, ambition and passion, meet each other, you know, magic happens.
Yeah, it really does. And I'm so interested to know really what drew you to the sport of fighting, because I feel like you've probably had a different mindset around tackling things that seem hard or tackling things that seem like nobody else has done from a very early age, because you've started having success with this early on, which means that you were not just trailblazing when you saw success, right? When women were now all of a sudden a part of UFC, like you were doing that. That was birthed from something in you at an early age. So where was it? Like, take us back, because I think this is probably a really important part of the girl that I see today, the woman I see today. What has really shaped you, or what was it in those formidable years where you were like, I'm going to do something great that's outside the box?
Well, I think it boils down to my mom. I think she led with a great example of how strong women can be. My mom is one of the strongest women. I mean, I've seen her endure so much more than I realistically think she ever should have had to. And it's actually been an amazing process to see my mom in this, second chapter of her life, finally starting to dial it in with being able to say no a little bit, not the people pleasing, the chronic people pleasing we see women kind of endure. And I saw my mom go through that for so long, but because of that, I saw her strength. I saw her resiliency. I saw her ability to really do it all. And yes, I think that it took a big toll on her, and I don't want her to continue to live like that. So we work on it. But in those forming years for me, seeing what was possible from a woman was, I think it led the charge in the sense that it gave me the understanding that there's nothing that we can't do. There is nothing that we can't overcome. And I think what was important that I would learn later is how to balance that, where I wasn't giving and offering every part of my being to maintain not only the goals that I set for myself and managing some load management, but the things that other people wanted or needed or asked of me as well. So for a large part of my life, I had a very full plate. And I would say as of the last few years, my mom and I together have been working on bringing it back down to a place of balance and a place of reasoning. But my mom is just an incredibly strong woman. And here's another thing. When I would tell my mom what I wanted to do or be, because for a long time, my ambitions were to be an astronaut. I wanted to go into outer space. I was obsessed all the way through middle school. And sometimes when you tell people that, they want to give you the reality of it, even as a child. What are the odds that you're going to be an astronaut? Or that's not going to happen, or that's not very likely. Maybe set your goals a little more realistic. You hear those things way more often than you don't. But my mom, she would always respond with, you will, you will. And she would just tell me I would. And she was so confident in it that I really believed that. And I think if I had set my goals to that, if that's what had um, really ultimately been my destiny, it would have also happened. But destiny had a way of seeking me out. I was not a fighter in the sense that I wasn't like a troubled child. I wasn't fighting on the streets or anything. I know that is some fighter stories that they were getting into trouble and they luckily found their way in a gym where they could have a healthy outlet. That wasn't my story. But at the same time, I think I wasn't afraid to take chances and I wasn't afraid to say yes when most people would say no.
Yeah, that's so good. I imagine there were probably several points along those earlier years too, where you had to kind of ask yourself, like, am I all in on this? Like, am I really taking this somewhere, or is this something that I'm just kind of like it is just an outlet for you? Like, were there any defining moments where you felt like I know I'm doing exactly what I was designed to do?
Yes, I would certainly say there was. And so I started wrestling in high school, and that was by chance. Again, I think destiny started to creep its way into my life. My best friend at the time, Sharon, also a female, was like, "Do you want to go out for wrestling?" And I was like, they don't have female wrestling. She's like, "Yeah, I know, but if they don't offer women's sport, turns out they have to let you do it on the guys' team." And I was like, I don't know. That sounds strange, but I certainly had no interest in playing basketball and I wanted to play a sport. And so that was the option. And I said, okay, let me ask my mom. I went home. Of course, my mom said, there's nothing that I will ever limit you on. There's nothing that I will ever tell you that you can't do because you're a female, which I'm so grateful for because 9 times out of 10, when I would try to get other females to come out for wrestling, that was their story. My mom or my dad won't let me.
Wow.
So I was really grateful. My dad actually did not know that I was wrestling, probably at least for the first season. I
No
know.
way.
I
No way.
know. My mom was the ultimate avoiding conflict as well. I'm sure my dad would have ex-nayed it. Me wrestling with young teenage boys certainly doesn't fit the fancy, I think, of most fathers, especially at that time when that just was not something that you saw or experienced. And we didn't come from a family of wrestlers either. Neither one of my parents wrestled or any immediate family members. I think my great uncle, my mom's uncle, was the only person in my family that I knew of that wrestled. And he was absolutely dead against me wrestling guys.
Wow.
Yes, he was absolutely dead set against it. He had no problem with females wrestling, but he wanted girls to wrestle girls. And I'm like, well, Uncle Eddie, I said, we can't just wrestle girls because there's not enough girls. We've got to start somewhere. How do you start?
Yeah.
And so I love him to death. He's just such an amazing person and is always supporting me. But he just, girls shouldn't wrestle boys. Well, yeah, you're probably right. But until
Right.
there's enough girls to wrestle each other, it's what we have to do. So
Yeah.
I kind of helped, I feel like, trailblaze a little bit of a path for women in wrestling at my school. And I think there were many other women in other schools who were doing the same thing and laying down that groundwork. So as I went on to college, a defining moment for me, I again had a friend of mine who was like, "You got to come check out this mixed martial arts club sport." And I'm like, "What is it?" And she's like, "Well, it's this, you," and I thought it was karate, actually. I really didn't even know what it was. And I was like, "I'm not interested in doing karate." Like, no offense. I know you're a black belt or whatever, but that just doesn't fit my fancy. I'm not interested. So she kept bothering me. She was like, "Look, most of these guys are former wrestlers. They had just cut the wrestling program from Central Washington University, I think the year prior. So a few of these guys that didn't transfer out to other schools were looking for something like wrestling to do." And I said, okay, I realized like she's just going to kind of keep at me with this. And I said, well, okay, if they're wrestlers, what's going to hurt? I'm just going to give it a whirl. So I went, and on my very first day, I learned how to choke people. and I was all about it. I was hooked from that point. Although I did not want to fight. I didn't even want to learn the striking aspect. So they would
Okay.
teach both of the aspects at this class or whatever you'd want to call it, this club sport. And I said, I just don't even want to learn the striking. I just want to learn the jujitsu aspect. I want to learn the choking and the submission holds. I said, that can add right to my wrestling. This is fun. But then I went to my first amateur event and I watched some of the now teammates, I guess you could kind of call them, fight. And I really had a visceral reaction. My body just lit up. I just felt exhilarated. And I kind of had the thought, if they can do it, I could do it too. Although I had no idea at the end of the fight card, they were going to announce that there would be an all female fight card in about 3 weeks and that I would make my way down there and just sign up with no prior striking experience and very limited submission wrestling experience. I was pretty much just a wrestler. So 3 weeks later, I had my first fight. I won the first round. And then the second round, I got stuck in a Muay Thai clinch. And for those of you who don't know exactly what that is, it's kind of like when somebody puts the palms of their hands on the back of your head and the forearms kind of lace forward over your collarbone. And so they're kind of cradling your head and you can't really go backwards and you can't really go forwards. And they begin to knee you either in the body or the face, depending on how skilled you are at defending, which I think I have admitted at this point, I had no idea how to strike or defend against the striking. So I got my nose broken very badly, smashed actually. And I remember just kind of diving at her ankles, just trying to take her down again. She managed to get on my back at that point because I was so out of position, just trying to get this to the ground so I wouldn't take any more punishment. And I remember that moment when I was on my knees and my forearms and I was watching blood steadily run from my nose and make a pool on the mat in front of my face. And it was that moment, I think, that a fighter was born. That was a
Wow.
very big moment in my career because that was the make or break moment. That was the fight or flight moment. That was, what am I here to do? And I think before that, I had missed the objective that it was a fight. I know that because in round one, I just took her down and held her. I don't even know if I threw a punch on the ground because I really didn't know what I was doing. And I wasn't comfortable enough to even strike on the ground if I even remembered, which I don't think that I did. But in that moment, I knew that I wanted to win this fight. And so I began to buck her off. So imagine like a bull rider on a bull. And I got her to fall down in front of me on the ground. And I stood up and I just began raining down punches. And it was a pretty bloody mess. There was blood all over me, all over her, and I was still bleeding profusely. And that's where the round ended. So I went back to my corner after round two, and I felt like I was looking at 2 or 3 ghosts because those were my cornermen, and they had never seen a female fight through, much less sustain a severely broken nose. And they couldn't stop the bleeding, and they just kind of freaked out, and they threw in the towel. And it was a tough pill to swallow because I know that I had finally figured out what I was there to do. And I never got to go back out for that third round. But I think that also motivated me moving forward, knowing that something clicked and something had switched in me. And I knew that I had more to offer, and I felt slighted. I felt cheated from that opportunity to go out there and show what I had in the third round, in the most difficult position that an amateur fighter could potentially be in with sustaining the damage that I had. But I wanted to go out for the third round. And they, sent me to the back room. I'm bleeding over a trash can. I don't really want to talk to anybody. My mom finds me. I probably aged her 10 years. My poor mom, she was the only one there for me, front row, and just seeing your child, I couldn't imagine now because I have a 5.5-year-old daughter and a 3.5-year-old son. And I can only imagine that it never changes. Like you always look at them as the babies, as your
Right.
babies.
Yeah.
And I just, yeah, I can already see that that will not change. And I feel so bad still for what I put my mother through. But she lovingly supported me and always has supported me, has always been a front row person, regardless of what it put her through. She was always there for me. So we went home. It was Christmas break. My grandpa was there, who was, I think it's fair to say, a bit sexist and quite chauvinistic and old school. And he just made every comment under the book, whether he thought I heard it or he didn't. There was just so much talk about how could my parents let me fight, and I'm 19, so it's not like my parents exactly had jurisdiction over me at that point. And it sucked. I really had to deal with a lot of internal back and forth in my own head at that point. But I think, again, it just motivated me to want to prove that I could do it better. And I looked quite interesting, I would say. I still remember myself looking like a raccoon and a lion had a baby. That was kind of my
Oh.
face. My nose was flat and wide. I had no definition because my face was so swollen. And then I had two giant black eyes, and I was quite a sight to see. So I kind of just hid away for a couple of weeks. Fortunately, this happened over Christmas break, so I wasn't at school, or that would have been a whole other disaster.
Yeah.
But that was my start in
Wow.
mixed martial arts. That was my very first fight.
That is an incredible story. To me, like one of the standouts though, because you were doing things that were off the beaten path, and you kind of had to. Like there's nobody else really going before you that you can say, "Yeah, I'm going to do it like this person." Like you had to be the person. But all that, and really, you had your mom in your corner. And I think that says a lot because you really only need one person, I feel like, that truly has your back, that believes in you for you to carry something pretty far. And so I think that that's like, that to me is such an encouragement because you may face like a lot of our listeners, they're very educated in their health and they're looking for so many ways to improve and optimize the way that they feel. But sometimes they might not be in an environment that is encouraging their growth or an environment that's encouraging their healing. And so I think like even listening to your story, so much, like you accomplish so much without having that person in front of you to model. And so even if it hasn't been done, like I feel like that really is a testimony that it can be done. You just may need like one person. Like you may need like one person that can just speak truth into you, that can encourage you, that can be there to pick you up when you feel like everybody thinks I'm crazy and nobody else sees the work that I'm putting in. I mean, do you feel like that was the case for you with your relationship with your mom, where it was like you felt a lot of opposition or maybe just self doubt and discouragement that like maybe this isn't worth going for because I'm not really sure that it's going anywhere or that I'm the person to take it there?
So at the time, I didn't have the ability to have the foresight of the impact that my career would end up having on the sport. So I'm very grateful now that I can sit back and look back and see these moments that I didn't realize were such moments at the time.
Mm.
And to talk about my mom, so my mom has always supported me. However, even she let me know her worry and concern, which was difficult for me to still continue to go sort of against, because I guarantee you my mom would have preferred, and even at times, she let that be known, like, gosh, Miesha, I'm worried about you. Are you sure that you want to continue to fight and get hit in the head? When, you're going to school and trying to use your brain, are you sure that this is what you want to do? But at the end of the day, she was always there. But even my mom had voiced her concerns, so
Yeah.
I think what's really important to remember is that there's always a duality to our own personalities. And you
Mm.
have an option and an ability to be your own support, your own best friend. So even if there's not that one person, although I would consider my mom that one person, but in all of it, just like anybody, she wasn't all in. Like, she would be there physically to support me, and she would put herself through whatever, and she would never tell me no, but she would be honest with me, and she would always voice her concerns, and she would always say, I'm worried, or are you sure, kind of putting that question. I never had the question. I never
Mm.
had the question. I never doubted. I never even thought that it would turn into what it turned into. I mean, when I first started doing this, I was fighting for free. My first 6 fights, I got paid nothing,
Oh,
absolutely nothing. I just wanted to do it. It felt good. It felt right. It felt like where I was meant to be. And there was no future. There was no UFC for women. There wasn't even Strikeforce yet. And barely there's this show that started with supporting women's MMA and doing kind of an all women's show was called Bodog Hook and Shoot. For any of you fans listening out there, if you know what that is, then you are a diehard, because it was the birth of women's MMA. It was the birthplace, I believe, for women's MMA. And then Strikeforce came along and started to kind of trickle in a little bit of women's fighting and grew it into something worthwhile, to where the UFC put eyes on it and said, okay, we think it's proven enough that we will finally bring women over. And that was the big deal, because for a long time, the president of the UFC, Dana White, had been interviewed numerous times saying women will never fight in the UFC. So, I kind of ran through that all quickly, but I guess for me, I knew that I wanted to compete in this sport above all. And I'm so glad that my mom was not a roadblock for me,
yeah.
but I believe that I was the person that I needed. I was the person that was there for me. And we all have this little voice in the back of our head, or we talk to ourselves with guilt sometimes. You break your diet, or you didn't go to the workout, and you're kind of down on yourself.
Mm.
That's the person that you can let run rampant and kind of just have their way with you inside your own head. Or you can realize that you can actually have a bit of conscious control over that
Yeah.
voice, and um, remind yourself in those moments when your internal best friend is not being a very good friend, like you're not giving yourself what you need or the support that you need, that you can consciously decide to override, even if it starts out as an argument with yourself in your own head, because thoughts just go in our head. We really can't control sometimes how we think. Like the other day, I went into Sprouts, and I was like, "Oh, those baked goods look so good," and I was like, I was literally like, "Shut up." Like, I was like, literally, because I brought that voice to a consciousness. I didn't just let it be a
Yeah.
thought. I was like, okay, I'm going to recognize that I'm thinking about this, and I'm just literally going to um, have this conversation with my own head, which might make me sound like an insane person, but I think a
Yeah.
lot of people don't realize that we do have an ability to influence that. So, with that being said, I think bringing that conscious awareness and looking back at how I've always kind of thought was, this is, at the time, it was the most important thing to me. And it's still a very important thing. The sport is important to me, but I found much more balance in my life as I've progressed through it.
Oh my gosh, that story's so funny, but we do that all the time. Do you think that voicing it, because I love having tools. I was just interviewing somebody else this morning. We were talking about this very thing because a lot of these conversations and dialogues we have in our head. And so we don't even give ourselves a chance for overcoming or almost like breaking a stronghold or a pattern in our life because we immediately get ourselves in a position where we've argued our way out of it. Like we're just not even, so it's like we have the argument in our mind before we can even access something that would result in us turning things around, like not talking down to yourself, not being so critical? Like, are there other than like maybe voicing things out loud, what are the other things, like the tactical stuff that has supported you in breaking through mental barriers?
That's such a good question. And there are a few things that I feel like have really helped me. And one is practicing mindfulness, because when you can really be in the moment that you're actually in, you can become aware of the thoughts and the feelings that you actually have. And if we are so busy over consuming or thinking about the things we have to do, if we never give ourselves a quiet moment, if you are somebody who has to have music on or a podcast or some kind, the TV running in the background, something to constantly occupy your thought or time, then chances are you are not comfortable or you don't know how to be alone with yourself.
Yes.
Because when you're alone with yourself, you don't know what's going to come out of that head of yours. You don't know what dialogue, what you're going to have to process, because it's when we have the downtime that I really think that we need to allow ourselves and make time for, dedicate that, be a good best friend to ourselves. That's when you're going to find out maybe what it is that you actually need to process, or that you need to work through, or that you need to focus on. And I mean, I love to, listen to podcasts. I don't listen to music that much anymore. I have my little moods every once in a while that I'll want to, but I mostly like to listen to things where I'm going to learn. And even then, sometimes I'll say, you know what? I think right now I'm just going to take the next 10 minutes and I'm going to take a mindful shower. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to eat in quiet, and practicing those moments of engaging your senses and really bringing yourself present
Yeah.
will allow for you to have some space and time to have the conversations with yourself. And you can't avoid those forever. Or maybe you can, but I think it's hyper unproductive. I think it's very unproductive to never offer yourself the time to have conversations. So for me, this has been a huge, huge, life changing thing that I would recommend to anybody. And it started for me with mindful showers and mindful meals. So if when you get in the shower, you engage your sight, your smell, your touch, your feel, all the physical senses that you have, and you just kind of sit there and you try to focus on those things. And when you have a thought come in your mind, you just notice it, and then you try to re-engage your senses, and you just keep doing that over and over and over. It's kind of like trying to hang on to a balloon, like, that's going to
Yeah.
float away. You let go of the balloon, it floats off. You got to grab it again. You got to grab your balloon and kind of keep it. And that's just the way the mind works. You'll never be able to just sit in silence and think about nothing. But the faster you can re-engage your senses, this is how you get in touch with yourself, I feel like, and how you
Yeah.
stay in touch with yourself. And the same thing when I have a meal, I sit down and I look at my food, smell my food. Not always. I'm a busy mom. I don't always. Sometimes I just throw it down the hatch. But now there are times when I sit and I really try to taste the food. I try to slow down. I try to enjoy my meal. I actually sit on my bottom, which is just, for the first few years of my life with my kids was not a thing. I never sat down. I didn't sit down to eat. I didn't sit down for any, it was just go, 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 serve, 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 help, help, help. And I realized that it was a little more counterproductive than I would have liked to think that it was at the time. So I hope that is helpful for people. It's also, I think, how you get in touch with what you really need and how you can be a good friend to yourself.
I love the mindfulness shower. I think I've never even heard of that, and I like love that idea because I'm so guilty of doing the same thing. So many of us, we just fill every nook and cranny of our day with some kind of noise. And I think what I'm beginning to realize is a lot of times we're just trying to avoid something
Yes.
because we just don't, like you said, we don't want to be alone with our thoughts. We don't want to be in stillness because we're afraid of what might come up, because there's pain, there's things we've experienced, there's hurtful things, traumas, and we have these avoidant tactics that
Yes.
kind of keep us numb to the stuff that's deep down
Yeah.
and distracted, honestly. And like what I hear you saying is like you just have to slow down. It's like just
Yes.
even enjoying your showers. Like we're just so
Yeah.
rushed and busy and thinking about doing things and listening to things and consuming so much all the time. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's something there when it comes to what are you avoiding?
Yep.
What are you trying, because it's all coping mechanisms, but a lot of times we just think, oh, we're just so busy, just so busy. Well, how much of that are you choosing? That's always a question I have to ask myself when I complain to people about being busy. I feel like I get a gut check. Do you ever feel that sometimes? And it's like, okay, I just complained about all these things and how I have no time to even take a shower. Yet most of the things I rattled off are all things that I voluntarily signed up for.
Correct. Correct. And we are just in a society that pushes. And I really think with social media and even electronics, they are requiring our brains to work at a speed that maybe wasn't exactly intended. And I think it's really important that we disconnect because everybody is good at plugging in and connecting and going and being in overdrive and just go 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 go. You've got to only way that you have value is how much you can check off your to-do list every single day. And I really believe there's so much more to be experienced out of life than just checking off your items on the to-do list. And I think spending quality time with yourself where it's quiet. So some people will try to make time for themselves, but I promise you're missing the mark if you're going to get your nails done or you're taking that bath or you're sitting down with a glass of wine or you're having dinner with your significant other or you're just going to go spend time with your kids. If you are not there, if you are not
Mm.
there, you're going through the motion, you're not serving the purpose.
Yep. So
So
good.
you're actually wasting your time and it's not helpful and it's not beneficial. It's like, yeah, you did this, but if you were on your phone the entire time, or if you were listening, or if you weren't fully present with yourself, and that's a skill set. It takes time to develop that. It's not the easiest thing to do, but I encourage everybody to work on it. And it can be as simple as like just hanging out with yourself on a drive to the gas station. Turn the radio off for a second, take a breath. Like you have time in your day to do this. You don't have to make extra time. Not everything has to be about like, oh, I'm going to make a bubble bath and like, take 30 minutes. No, you can literally spend time with yourself like on a drive. Yeah. I mean, when you're 5 minutes before you get out of bed in the morning, check in with yourself. What's your plan? Think about your day, what you want out of the day, what's your to-do list, and just kind of like enjoy that few minutes before your day gets started and gets crazy. Because I think everybody's going, going, going these days.
It is. It's the culture. I mean, it's hustle culture. And especially for women, I see this being so detrimental because we feel like there is no different pace for women than it is for men. And I'm sure that you could speak to this from being in a sport that is still very heavily male dominated, but was male dominated, where it's like, okay, well, what's the standard for women? I mean, they've got, and we're like a whole different, like species basically. Like we're dealing with different hormones, different physiology. A lot of things are different. And yet the standard is always, well, if you're not doing something productive, if you're not chipping away at that list or working towards something, then you're behind. Like you're
Yeah.
missing out. And so
Yeah.
you feel like you're sacrificing something by not being actively engaged or pursuing something, where the conversation that we're having is like, actually, you can gain a lot more ground if you just were able to step back and know when to take the break. So how did you even determine that? Because I imagine like this is a sport that is like the most tactical, physically involved sport. So how do you know when, hey, I've hit the threshold, like I need to step back, I need to take breaks, and hey, I can go a little bit more, I can train a little bit harder. Like what are like the standards that you have so that you have those boundaries in place where this is the line, that I've hit the line, I've hit the threshold.
Yeah, Courtney, I'm so glad that you brought that up because that is something, if I were looking back and trying to tell a younger me, this is what I would talk about. This is exactly what I would try to instill in myself younger. And one of my biggest prerogatives is to instill this in my children because my ceiling is their floor. And what I'm just now learning at 37 is something that I think I can teach them from the day that I learned it, which is going to be, 5 years old for them, 3 years old for them, even younger. I've been starting on this stuff. But, I think setting boundaries and understanding the female biology And so for the male listeners, hang on a second. Don't skip forward. Don't skip to the next podcast, because this is also very important for the men in our life to know. And, I love men. I think men are amazing. And I think they would be more helpful if they understood how to be more helpful. But we have to understand ourselves first. So I'm going to talk about what I've learned about myself and my hormones. And I, for so long, really did it wrong because I did not understand how to train as a woman. I trained according to a male model. I ate according to a male model, and I lived according to a male model in a man's world. And I think it is such an injustice sometimes that we do this to ourselves, that we think we've got to keep the pace that men bring to the table. And men are just different. They have a 24-hour hormone cycle, and they get testosterone every 15 minutes. I mean, I don't know about you, but like testosterone's it's a pretty awesome hormone. You usually feel like you can like conquer the world. Like, for example, though, women get testosterone once a month. We get it during one time during our cycle of 28 days. So no day is the same for us. They're working on a 24-hour cycle. We're on a 28-day cycle. It's very different. And we have different hormones that become present at different times. And my theory on this is, as we have a feminine energy, when you lean into that and you are a maternal being and you connect with your children as you've built them inside of your body, and a lot of women nourish them continued by connection through their body, that we need to have a understanding of all of the emotions that our children are going to go through. That's what I believe the divine intention was for women to experience the different emotions every single month. But men don't necessarily need as much. And now I'm generalizing. Obviously, I know there are single fathers who are doing it all and great job, and there are moms who are CEOs and whatnot. But I think that our deep purpose as women was to be nurturing and to understand our children and be able to identify the things that they're going through and say, I know how that feels. I know how that feels. I just felt like that yesterday. I know what it's like to feel like that. And where men, if you go back to the hunter-gatherer days, they just needed to focus on like getting food. They needed to be strong. They needed to be able to protect the family. And I still think there is some in our roots, regardless of how domesticated we become as humans, that still kind of speaks to this natural biology that we have, most people I think have deep down inside of us. So although these are broad strokes and general terms and don't apply necessarily to everybody, in my circumstance, they do. And having a masculine energy that balances me out and can also understand that, hey, the week before my cycle, that's just not a good week to add things to the plate because I've got progesterone present. And it's just a hormone that really makes a molehill feel like a mountain. The problems that aren't so big feel big this week, and I'm having a hard time. Like, do you think you could actually take something off of my plate? Could you support me? Could you help me in that? And I don't, my partner is amazing in that way. We communicate openly about now what I understand about my hormones, but this also comes to athletics. I think it also comes to workload. I think it also comes down to communication. I think that when we understand ourselves, we also take guilt off of us.
Yeah.
Right? When I did not understand, I didn't know my hormones at all. And I would train, and there would be some weeks that I would just start crying. I would be doing a sparring session. I would be like, not only do I not feel like doing it, but I did it anyways, but I did the hardest thing the hardest way. I just didn't work smarter for myself. Now I say, look, I know I'm supposed to spar today. I can tell that I don't feel like it. And it's an honest accountability. This is not about being lazy. It's not about always show up and do it anyways. I know that there's a culture out there that really pushes that. I think that might work better again for the male model. I think it's important that the female understands that there will be times in her 28-day cycle that will just not be as conducive to doing the hardest thing the hardest way. And there are better times spent better ways. I'll say, okay, I'm not going to spar today. I'm going to
Yeah.
do technical sparring. I'm not going to do the hardest thing, the hardest
Yeah.
way. I will still get what I need out of today, and I will move my sparring that I was going to do today. I'm going to move it to 3 days from now. I'll still get it in, but I'm going to do what works for me this week. And then hallelujah. And then in the middle part of the cycle, when we have testosterone present, okay, I'm hitting the weights. Why not take
Yeah.
advantage of that? There's no
Yeah.
other time that I'm going to put on the muscle in the cycle that I would be able to otherwise. And so just really listening to myself and understanding myself as a female, and it takes the guilt out of the equation too, because I know that in within 48 to 72 hours, if I'm having a hard time and it's due to hormones being present, then just hang tight. I'll be fine in a little bit. I don't need to feel guilt about this. But I used to, because I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know
Yeah.
why I would show up some days and just feel like garbage. And I just couldn't keep up with the males that I was training with. And it was so taxing and it was exhausting. And it was all just a misunderstanding and really not knowing
Yeah.
how my body works as a woman.
Yep. That is so valuable in understanding, because you'll know when to advocate for yourself. Because I mean, did you ever have a time where you had like trainers that were like, no, you need to get in here and do it? And you're like,
Yes.
I mean, because I
And I
imagine like
just did
I mean,
it.
you're training all the time. Like
Oh,
you've got to
yeah.
know, like, if I'm taking a stand, I'm convicted. I feel fully confident that this is the decision I need to make. So you've had to go like toe to toe, I'm sure, so many times.
Well, yes and no. Before I would listen and I would do it and I would be an obedient student and I would just push through and I would suck it up and I would
Yeah.
shut it down. I would close off, I would shut down. I wouldn't listen to myself. And sometimes I sustained injuries for this, because sometimes your body's trying to communicate that, hey, we're not at full speed. Maybe it's not a good idea to go spar a man right now when we're just not in the position to be as explosive. I mean, there are so many things about the way that our bodies work that can be like not helpful in supporting what your actual goal is. Your goal is to perform well in a fight. So how do we navigate that? And I feel like this last fight that I had at age 37, I finally figured out how to hit all the things on the head. And I'm sure there are more things that I need to get, but this was the one. This was the fight camp that was going to determine whether I continue fighting or whether I don't, because I felt like I finally had it all right. I had the mindfulness in part for a year. I understood my hormones. I understood the better times in my cycle for dropping weight and losing water weight versus not. I mean, this is a real thing for women that I think is we just don't look at. For sports, that weight is something we have to consider, and we have to dehydrate ourselves. That's part of what we do. And to make a certain weight on a scale, there are certainly times of the month that is a better or worse time to try
Yeah.
to attempt to do that. And I've seen a lot of females miss weight and get a lot of criticism for missing weight. And I think, again, they don't understand how their bodies are working, and it's just a bad time for you to try to attempt this. So, with all that being said, I was either obedient, or once I learned these things about my cycle, I didn't really have to advocate for myself, because at this point I had also learned how to not work with people who were not going to understand what I was saying. I am not a 20-year-old or 18-year-old or 22-year-old that hasn't found themselves yet. Like, I'm a very confident, strong in my conviction, the things that I know, the things that I believe. And so I will have conversations with coaches or people that I want to work with. And sometimes it turns into education, and we are talking about female biology, and it's like, if they don't get it, then I think they're not the right person for me to work with. And it's okay. But most of the males are actually surprisingly reciprocative.
Mm,
Once you explain it, they're kind of like, oh, I didn't know that. Makes sense. Like, let's do what's best for you.
yeah.
Now that I understand, I'm on your team. And I think most men would like that, or like to be like that, and understand what's going on with their female, with their daughters, with their wives, with their moms, with their sisters. It should be a dialogue that's more open and open and understanding. And every single person that exists on this planet came from a woman, and we go through this to bring life into the world. And I think that it should be not, not looked down on, not poo pooed. We go through it for a reason. And I think there's a value to it. And I think when women can understand it, we can help men understand it, and everybody wins. I certainly think our relationship, I'm talking about mine and Johnny, my fiance, we have a much better relationship understanding what I go through. And that's
Yeah.
such a beautiful, it's so synergistic once you kind of get on the same page.
Yeah, you're so right. And the conversation has really become more popular. Like it is now, the conversation's now being had, like more so than it ever has. Nobody talked about female hormones. Nobody knew about them, just like you. Like most
Right.
women, they're just like, well, when I'm on my period or the 2 days before my period, I just feel terrible. But nobody realizes that in the luteal phase, the like 10 days leading up, you're likely going to be carrying like 3 to 5 pounds more fluid than you are in the follicular phase up to ovulation.
Right.
So, I mean, that's like kind of a big deal. And like most women are depressed about their bodies. They're like, I'm so puffy and, my abdomen feels swollen. And it's like, yeah, because your uterus is full of blood. Like
Yeah.
that's like, that is actually the design. But if you're strictly going off of what your body looks and feels like, half the month, you're going to be really frustrated with yourself.
Yes, and diet culture is so it's so disgusting sometimes, and I think women think that they're supposed to look like, a cover model all the time, or they're, and they put that pressure on themselves, and they think that it's their fault for, you're going to crave more sweet things that few days before your cycle. In case you didn't know that, if in case you haven't noticed that,
Yeah.
for me, it's like, I mean, and I mostly just let myself have it.
Yeah.
If I want some dark chocolate, or if I want an ice cream, or if I want that, and you know what I do? I don't feel bad about it. I don't let guilt be a
Yeah.
part of this cycle anymore, because I know it's my body's craving this. And yes, it's better to just eat mangoes or something like that. And if you can adhere to just eating some mangoes and strawberries, I applaud you. I mean, that would be a much better way to do it. Processed sugars clearly are not great for you, but I think there's a balance in everything that we do. And in that time, I'm more likely to engage in just eating some bread, or eating something that I enjoy, and fully satisfying myself with the present moment, and really enjoying it and savoring it and getting what I needed out of that. Why do I want that? One, it's comforting. Two, my body hormonally wants my blood sugar to be a little bit higher during that time. And those things are okay. And you are less likely to mismanage that if you give yourself what your body's telling you that you want at that moment. It's a little reprieve, a little like break, a little just enjoying the moment. But if you also are not present and you don't enjoy the moment, you're going to go back to the chocolate bar, and you're going to finish the whole thing, or you're going to eat the whole pint of ice cream, because you're still mentally, emotionally trying to get what you needed out of that splurge. So this is also how I think that I can manage having both,
Yes.
and like keeping the cup
Yes.
full, so to speak. It's okay to indulge. It's okay to have some treats here and then. Just make sure you're getting what you need out of it. And then
Right.
it will subside, and you won't continue to feel the need to overindulge.
Right. And it's all about expectations. Like if I mean, I'm the same as you. Like 2 days before my period, I am like, I need carbs and chocolate. Like
Yes.
I just but I know I'm not like a runaway freight train. I just know that that is how I feel. And if I just indulge, like I found this local woman, and she makes like super clean like chocolate. I mean, they're like pastries, but they're gluten free.
Yum.
They're good, but they are so like it's like a whole piece of cake. Like it is so good. And so every month I'm like, you
Yep.
know, when it comes down to that time, I get some Maple Maize, and
Yeah.
I don't make a big deal out of it because I haven't set the expectation that I'm going to be counting macros. Like there's a time and a place when I can dial it in and it's not painful. Like I'm not mentally beating myself up or frustrated with
Yes.
thinking that I failed. So just like have a rhythm in your life where you can build in margin for grace, but also just realize like that doesn't mean you're derailing. Doesn't mean I got
No.
to start my diet over.
And you know what? Also, consistently saying no to yourself registers in the body as a deprivation. And when we always deprive, that has consequences too,
Yeah.
in the sense that you are going to be stressed out because you're never giving your opportunity for yourself to have a break or indulge or cheat. And if you do, if you're experiencing guilt, you're likely raising your cortisol levels, which is going to make you battle your weight far more than if you just indulged guilt free and you didn't stress about it. Then you could actually have a slice of cake and not gain weight. If you are not losing weight and you are strict on your diet, it is probably because you are stressing yourself
Yeah.
to high heaven. Like you're just
Yeah.
causing havoc in your body, and your body's not going to let go of anything then. So,
Yep.
like, have a
Yeah.
treat and don't freak out about it, and just do what you can to alleviate stress. I'm a huge proponent of breath work as well. I find myself using deep breaths to keep my calm. That's what I call it with my kids. It's like, okay, we have to find our calm. You have to find your calm. I have to find my calm. And
Yeah.
a lot of times we do that through breath work. And now sometimes I'll take a deep breath and my daughter will be like, Mom, I heard that. Are you stressed?
That's so funny.
I know. And sometimes I'm like, you know what? Right now I'm feeling a little frustrated or I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. I'm asking you guys to put your shoes on and nobody's listening to me. And it's really hard, or we'll
Yeah.
have these conversations, but she's starting to know that too. And so now my kids, oftentimes that's how they calm themselves down is I'll see them taking deep breaths and it's so cool. Again, the ceiling of, my ceiling is their floor. It's just so inspiring and it's motivating for me to continue to learn. And by the way, I know we touched on this before we started this podcast, but my daughter has bumps on the back of her arm. And I was obsessed with your podcast about vitamin A.
Yes. Yeah.
So good. And I've been incorporating sweet potatoes more into her diet. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure if that's like the best form of vitamin A for that type of deficiency, but she likes them and we're working on it. She already eats like a decent amount of meat, but I did want to pick your brain a little bit if you thought that there was anything in that,
Yeah.
is there a better form of vitamin A for that in particular? They do eat a little bit of liver here and there too. I try to eat
Yeah.
4 to 6 ounces a week. And I usually kind of break it up into a couple ounces each, like every other day. Um, and they'll eat a little
Yeah.
bite or two here or there. I tell them it's a superfood, like superhero food.
Yes.
Um, and so they'll eat
So
a little
good.
bit here and there. But I thought that episode was so good. I sent it to many friends and women that I know who wish to improve their health, some with some infertility struggles, some with just, my mom, people that I want to understand. And I never knew those things about vitamin A. So that was so informative. So I would love to
Oh,
hear what you have
so
to say on
good.
that.
Yeah, honestly, for kids, I really love doing like cod liver oil because it also has a really good natural source of vitamin D as well, which can be so supportive for their immune system. Um, there is a company called Rosita that makes teeny tiny gel caps, like little tiny ones, so they're easy to swallow because
Okay.
I'm telling you, no kid will ever take the liquid cod liver oil. Like I
Not
can
willingly.
not willingly, and I have forced my kids to try a lot of things, and the other unfortunate part is like you can't like mask it, you can't like add it to a smoothie or anything else because it just the it's just so potent, and like the taste is overpowering. So that would be something that I've actually found to be really helpful, and you can dose it small for kids, and it's really really good for their development in a lot of different ways. But it has a good natural source of bioavailable vitamin A, which I love. So if you want to bump that up, you could get the Rosita gel caps of the vitamin A, and just see if that moves the needle at all. But micronutrient testing is really helpful because a lot of times we do have nutrient deficiencies, even though we have such an excess of food. Like we are, over
Right.
consumers, but we're very underfed from a
The
nutrient
nutritional
standpoint.
standpoint. Yeah.
But again, it comes back to stress. A lot of times, a lot of us are facing, kids and adults are facing a lot of stressors that we really aren't considering or aware that our body is trying to manage, which uses up a lot of these stores. Like it demands
Right.
a higher level of nutrition. And sometimes I've just found too that, you know, if there are other symptoms that are present, like headaches or just like other little things that seem off that kids are mentioning too, like they may have some type of detoxification or methylation issue, and sometimes checking their methylation can be really helpful. I should put you in touch with our my co-host Dr. Motley, because he could probably do some work for her.
That would be incredible. Do they have to do a
Yeah.
blood draw though? Or can they
Mm-mm.
like prick their finger or saliva?
No, so well, if you do like micronutrient testing, the one that I like is a blood draw, but the way that he works, Dr. Motley works, he does like Chinese medicine. And so it's using a lot of different like pulse points and meridians and things like that, where and he works virtually with people. He's actually in Dubai right now. But he is phenomenal. And like he would be able to figure out exactly like which organ system is the priority, which one needs the most nourishment or is underfed energetically. And a lot of times, like it could be nutrients. You can use a lot of different herbs. So he'll muscle test for different herbs to find out which one her body would prefers. It's really fascinating.
Wow.
And I love that approach for kids because it's non-invasive. Like it
Right.
is not anything that's good. I actually have my daughter working with somebody here locally that does the same type of work. And there's so much information they can get by testing, like using it's basically like frequency medicine that basically you can find out like where energetically is there a block, like where is the energy being diverted away from, and those organs have specific nutrient needs, and they're attached to emotions. And there are certain emotions a lot of times, like even my daughter, she's being seen, she's 9, and there's just stuff that's, you know, it's not even stuff that she could probably put words to, but if it's jealousy of her sister, you know, and it's coming out and fighting, like those are a lot of things where she just shuts down, but it impacts her physiology to a degree. And so it's like, how do you give them the tools to be able to overcome that in a way where they're not learning processes of avoiding or stuffing or exploding all of these different things that we see as behavioral problems in children, where a lot of times like they may be poor methylators. They may be like tanked in serotonin or dopamine or have inflammation in their gut, things like that. So yeah, I'll have to connect you. I'll
That
connect you with them.
that would be fantastic. My children are everything to me, and I feed them a primarily organic, grass-fed diet, and it is still hard to
Yeah.
meet all the needs. And it's not only expensive, but it's just challenging. And so I feel any parents out there that are trying to get it right. So that is such valuable information. And I really try to get my kids outside too and get them vitamin D. Have you heard of this app called D Minder?
Yes,
You
I
use
have
it?
heard of D-Minder.
You've
I
heard
don't,
of it.
okay. I just heard of it. I'm trying to remember now who was the one that just told me about it. I mean, this was like in the last 2 weeks, somebody had just brought this up to me. I
It's
had not
so
heard of it.
good. It's so
Okay.
good. So, for the listeners, I encourage you guys to download this app. It's free. I have zero affiliation with it. I don't even know who created it, but I love this app because it will help you understand how much vitamin D you're producing from the sunlight. So it gives you options for like the color of your skin tone. So, fair skin obviously are going to get vitamin D a little bit quicker, and, darker skin is going to need a little more time in the sun. And it also adjusts to where you're located. So I live in Las Vegas, so it'll tell me the UVB rays there versus Florida. Anyways, this app is so amazing, and it'll let you set a goal of what you're trying to get your vitamin D intake to. And to your point, I make an effort to spend time in the sun without sunscreen and to put my children in the sun without sunscreen. I know that may be controversial, but I think sunscreen generally is full of chemicals. And I think that so long as we're staying with the rhythm of the year and we're getting in the sun when the UVB rays are low and we're building our tolerance to being in the sun. I am a sun or shade kind of person. I try to avoid sunscreen, although I think I'm going to make my own this year with some tallow, zinc oxide,
Yeah.
and there's one other thing in that. Whatever. I have this little recipe. It's like 3 things. It's super easy. But back to the D-Minder. I will go out and I take supplements too, and it's so hard to get to like the 40. I think it's like NGLs or something like that. I'm probably using the wrong
Yeah.
letters for the measurement, but it's because my body's using the vitamin D. So the app adjusts itself and it kind of like takes your vitamin D down while you're also adding to it. But I get competitive with this app. I'm like, I got to
Yeah.
get out in the sun. Like, where I just added vitamin D yesterday, and I make a tremendous effort to do this right. And I just think about so many people who probably don't know that a lot of their ailments or depression or health hormones, because vitamin D, right, becomes a hormone in the body. It's
Yeah.
so important, and we spend so much of our time inside. So I guess if you're going to take anything else away from this podcast, get your
Yeah.
vitamin D, and that app might be helpful for you because it's very helpful for me. So that and mindfulness. Try some mindful showers and mindful meals. Mindful meals will change your life. Food is so good, and it's really meant to be enjoyed. And it's such a shame that oftentimes we're eating, food that tastes good, and we just like shovel it down and don't really give it its rightful place and time to like really be enjoyed.
Yeah, that's so true. I just downloaded that app. I'm going to check that out because I remember somebody had mentioned that, but it is so interesting. And, honestly, like it's pretty cool that the stuff that you can do to track, like if it's something that you feel like is going to keep you motivated and engaged, like, I think it's great. Like I love looking at my HRV on my Aura ring. I'm like,
Yeah.
I am way more intentional about making sure like I'm in bed at a certain time and like
Yeah.
my sleep is protected because I know
Do you
that
get
even like
morning sunlight?
yes, oh my gosh. Well, as much as I can. I mean, I'm in South Carolina, so we definitely get, a good amount of sun here too. Probably not as much as you do, but yeah, I mean, it's like drinking alcohol. Like I know the things that tank my HRV, and
Oh
I'm
yeah.
just like, oh,
How
I can't.
about eating? How about eating late or close to sleep?
Yes,
That will crush my
exactly.
HRV.
Mine too. I mean, and it's like it's so funny because I'll be like, oh, I probably like would snack on that, but I also know that I'll be so disappointed in my HRV
Yeah,
tomorrow. So it does.
exactly. But it's
Oh,
helpful sometimes to have these tools. And even if you don't have an Aura ring, generally speaking, eating within 3 hours of going to sleep is going to affect your heart rate variability, which is basically a measure of how well your body is equipped to deal with stress. And stress could be like in the form of working out. It could also be in the form of just checking your emails if you're not very well equipped at keeping your stress levels in check. And then you are doing things that are also not letting you recuperate, you're really burning the
yeah,
candle at both ends, and you're likely to face some health ailments and struggle with how well you feel or how productive you ultimately can be. And with the idea that we all have to work until we're 65 to, or is it 67 now? Didn't they just up it recently? I feel like
I think
it's
they
higher
did.
than that, before we get to quote unquote retire. You really want to put things back in the gas tank and do these little things that are not that difficult. Like at least don't eat 2 hours before going to sleep so that your body can produce the right hormones at night and not be busy digesting food, but actually be putting things back together. If you're
Yeah,
not healing well, like if you have a back injury, if you have a neck, if it's just like, this has been bothering me forever, you may want to consider adjusting the times that you eat or don't eat. Maybe look into some intermittent fasting. Another thing that was so helpful to me in injury recovery is learning that human growth hormone does not play well with insulin. So if you're eating especially sweets before going to sleep and you're expecting your body to recover at night, you're going to inhibit that if you are eating especially anything with sweets close to bedtime. You basically will mute your human growth hormone for the night. So
yeah.
that was
Great
really
point.
interesting. Same thing goes when you're working out. If you drink a sweet drink, your growth hormone goes away that during that workout.
No way.
That
I don't think.
yeah, this
Well,
is
I guess if it does influence insulin, then that would make total sense, So,
yeah,
which is, I mean, that is really important because how many people are drinking like, a sugary drink
right.
or, maybe they think it's like an energy drink or something like that, but don't realize that there's some
Exactly.
interference there. Yeah,
So
that's Great
It's
advice.
fascinating, right? So my recommendation is just put a pinch of salt in your water if you're going to the gym. Don't even drink things that are sweetened by like stevia or other sweetened things during the workout or potentially even before the workout, because the body can still have somewhat of an insulin response, even if
Yeah.
there's not directly sugar in it. If it tastes sweet to your sweet buds, your taste buds, your sweet buds,
Yeah.
your taste buds,
Like,
then you might get a little bit of a response there that is going to release a little insulin and just, work a little bit against you. And if you're already working hard, you're already taking the time out of your day to get a workout in, like, let your body help you help you.
yeah. This is great advice. I mean, this is stuff that like I think a lot of us just don't even think about, or if we do, it's like I don't know if that's going to have any impact or not. We just kind of go on with our day. But if you're looking to optimize, your workouts and your post-workout recovery, I mean, you're putting in a lot of hard work. I definitely want to know, like,
Yeah.
what are the small tweaks and changes?
Absolutely. And I won't even put flavored aminos into my workout drink anymore. I won't even do that because,
Interesting.
you think you want amino acids, they're building blocks for proteins. Of course, when you're working out, it makes sense. But if it's sweet or tastes sweet, then there's a downside to it. So if I were going to encourage myself in a workout or make a suggestion, eat a hard-boiled egg before you go to the gym. That's going to give you a lot of
Okay.
great build aminos and building blocks, or some steak, or just wait until afterwards. I mean, I think your body can utilize those things both ways, but I would definitely steer clear of ingesting anything that's sweet or seemingly sweet
Yeah.
before or during your workout.
Do you do any creatine? Do you do
I
creatine? Like,
I do. I do. Yes, creatine
how
I
do you
do.
how do you time that? Do you do it before, during, or after workout?
I usually do it after because I usually forget to do it
Yeah.
before. It's just honestly, I forget. And I
Yeah.
get home and I'm like, oh, I just remember there because all my supplements are sitting out and I just remember then.
Yeah.
But to my understanding, what the studies say that it doesn't really make a big difference whether it's before, during, or after, that your body will still utilize it in those ways.
Yeah.
I'm obviously not a doctor. I try to educate myself as much as possible. And these are the protocols that I follow. So usually I do that afterwards. And I take creatine out of the picture at least a few weeks before I need to step on the scale and make weight, just because I know that
Yeah.
it can help your muscles hold water, which generally is good. But in a sport where you've got to pull water from the body, there are times when I
Right.
do, omit that from the diet.
Yep. Yep. So get the creatine, ladies. Don't be afraid of it.
No, yeah, don't be afraid of it.
Well, this has been so fun. I want to ask you one more question because I would love to know, based on all of these things you've experienced, because you've learned so much. And it's really cool that you are sharing so much of this, because a lot of times we don't get to see the behind the scenes of, what you've learned and how it's changed the way you do life. So, what does success for you moving forward into the next season or the next chapter of your life? Like, what is it that looks like success for you now based on all of the things that you've learned and experienced over the years?
I think everything really comes down to spending the time with myself, as I mentioned, to find out what it really is that I want or need out of my life.
Hmm.
I think when we take the time for ourselves to have a dialogue and a conversation with ourselves, we get to know what it is that we want. And I believe that this allows for us to start searching in the areas that we want for the fulfillment that we need. But if we constantly block ourselves out and we just go and we just do, then I think we're oftentimes going through the motions and we're exhausted and we're not fulfilled, and life just seems a little bit more dull, or a lot more dull than I think that it was meant to be. I think there's so much. Life is so rich and has so much to offer. So I think for me, that's been a huge um, a huge turning point for me, is really learning how to sort of be one with myself, and also, um, you know, yeah, learning about myself, really learning what I want, and load management. I think that was the other
Yeah.
thing that I was just searching to say: load management, not Just because we can endure doesn't mean we should.
Mm.
Just because we can do it all does not mean we should. Doesn't mean it's good for us, and it doesn't mean that it's good for the people around us. There are times in your life when you're going to have to do more than you feel okay with, and that's just part of life. But I really believe it should not be an everyday thing. And if you're struggling with that, maybe just get to know yourself a little bit better and get comfortable with the idea of being a better friend to yourself, setting boundaries. It's okay to say, hey, look, I need to schedule this meeting for next week because I'm busy this week, and busy could mean that you need an hour to go outside and plant some damn sunflower seeds. That's what I just did before this
Yeah.
podcast. I actually planted sunflower seeds, pickle bush, which I believe is just cucumber. That's good for pickling. I don't know. We'll find out. And cilantro. And it was good. And
Oh,
I had my vitamin D, I had my D Minder app on, and I was like, okay, we're going to see how much vitamin D. I got like 2,500 IUs in that hour that I was just out there and doing something that was so fulfilling to my soul and my being
yeah.
and my purpose. I will get to watch these sprout and grow and feed my family with these that have watermelon seeds that just sprouted. And that for me is the connection that I need with myself, with the earth, with my family. I'm hitting so many things, and it's okay that I'm not loading my schedule so full that I can't afford that time for myself, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes you just got to schedule in an hour and just say, look, I'm just not going to let anything, barring an emergency or, somebody really needing me that's like an emergency, I guess, barring that it's okay for me to take time for myself. And I promise if you do that, your quality of life will go up and the people around you will actually thank you for it because you're going to be a better mom, a better husband, a better wife, a better friend. You're just going to have more to offer.
Yeah. It all spills out of your life. That's what I'm realizing. The things that you absorb, the things that you are engaged with, the inputs of your life and influences of your life will all end up spilling out into the work that you do, into the relationships that you do. So if it's not something that you are tending, that you're gardening, that you're taking care of, then the things that overflow out of your life are not going to benefit your children. So it's like, take care of
Right.
yourself because if you do value your kids, don't you want that overflow in your life to be pouring into them? You're not pouring out of an empty cup because you're just depleted all the time. I mean, we all have seasons of life where they seem like depleting seasons,
Right.
but there are there are so many recovery seasons for you, but you have to know when to be able to push the pause button and say, like, just like you said, I could keep doing this or I could do this, but it doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that the timing is right or that I'm the right person for it. Somebody else
Yeah.
could do it too. And that's okay. And that might be the best thing for you and your situation. But I love how you just so beautifully addressed all of that and kind of brought it all together because I think that I mean you've had such an incredible impact in your sport and field and as an athlete but also as an advocate for women and now you're raising children and it's just really cool to see how you've taken all of that and it's bleeding out into communities and your children and it's doing a great work. So I love that you are carrying that responsibility and that assignment so well.
Well, thank you for the kind words. And I just want to touch on one other little tiny part of what you said about having a cup to pour into your children. I want people to understand this too, that yes, when you have energy to give to your children, they thrive in that moment. But I also have realized that your children will example themselves after you. And so what you are teaching them by doing things for yourself is also that it is okay for them to prioritize themselves and do things for themselves. So,
Mm.
for example, sometimes Amaya will go and she'll like make me drawings and she'll make me all these things and she'll make other people things. And I say, honey, why don't you make one for yourself?
That's cool.
Because children learn from an early age, they start getting conditioned to do for others, and that's where they get the, oh, thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for this, and thank you, and they get this sense of like, that's my value. This is where I'm the
Yeah.
most valued, when I do something for someone else. And so I try to lead by example by doing things for myself, but I also try to verbalize that it's very important that both my children learn to also do and appreciate things for themselves. So even if it's in their little language of a drawing or a craft or something, sometimes do it for yourself. Make a bracelet for yourself. Yeah, you
Yeah.
make one for your best friend, make one for yourself. Like, you deserve it too. And so I think that's just another benefit that comes from doing things for yourself as a parent, is that your children's little mirror neurons are probably going to kick on, and they're going to say, I remember growing up that mom made time for herself, and I don't need to feel guilty about doing that because that's just normal and natural. So we can start to
Yeah.
normalize that, I think, by being that example for our children. And so I guess I will leave it there. And thank you. Thank you for letting me talk about all this. I think we really went all over the place from.
I know. This was fun, but I love that you landed on the kids too, because it is something that I think I didn't learn until a lot later, and I'm still learning it now or unlearning it, is this people pleasing mindset. And we really do start to think that our value is based on how other people perceive what we have to contribute to them or to a specific
Right.
situation. And I think that that is really intentional and important, is like that starts early on, because otherwise, like a lot of children, we start to learn like, oh, well, if I do this, then I receive affirmation, then I feel valued, instead of, no, I carry the value. Whether somebody sees it or appreciates it, that
Right.
is not going to determine how the perspective I have of myself. And so I think that is like so important as parents that we recognize, because I definitely am like a recovering people pleaser. So
Aren't we
it
all? I feel like this is a chronic problem that a lot of women have. So I'm glad you talked about that. And
yeah.
you just said it really beautifully. I don't think I would have anything to add to that. That was really
Yeah.
well said.
Yeah, well, this has been great. It's been so fun to get to know you a little bit. And I've been able to watch and see what you've been doing on a much bigger scale, where so many other people, but we've really been afforded an opportunity to see behind the curtain of your life. And I'm just so grateful that you've been willing to share it and been vulnerable and really sharing what you've learned, because I know that a lot of people face the same struggles, and it may be different circumstances, but a lot of the takeaways are the same. And I think that it just feels good knowing somebody else has been there, somebody else has overcome, somebody else has found tools that supported them. And you've been able to share a lot of that with us today. So I'm just so grateful that you've been here. And I know Dr. Motley would definitely have missed. I'll have to, I'll connect you with him. But yeah, it's
Well, Courtney, no offense to anyone else, but after I heard your vitamin A episode, I was stoked that I would be having a one-on-one conversation with you. I think you are brilliant and you interview so well, and this has been a great conversation. So hopefully I will get to meet your counterparts soon, and I would love to be connected, but I really did enjoy having this conversation with you, and I do appreciate, again, being here.
Yes, guys, if you're listening, check her out on Instagram. She has a phenomenal, you put out great content, and it's so real. It's just authentic. You can tell it's just you, and you're serving a great community. I know you have a huge, massive career in the athletic arena, but you also are serving a lot of people just from a human standpoint. And I think it's really cool how you've just stewarded that platform so well. I am loving seeing life through, the lens of Instagram. So make sure you check her out. If you have questions, if you love this episode, guys, connect with us on Instagram. You can write us a review. You can share it with a friend. We love connecting. Thank you so much for joining us today, Miesha. Hopefully we'll see you again very soon. We'll maybe do another episode. I know there's so much we could talk about, but thank you again for joining us. And guys, we will see you on the next episode.